Okay, latest project, and why I haven't been posting a whole lot in the forums. I'll stop and make a video every once in a while. But this is the last segment of our fence project on a current kind of contract with a guy. I was kind of hired to manage this side of it, but they've kind of been treating me a little bit more like a subcontractor. So I've had some expenses out of pocket on this, and that has influenced some of my decisions on materials. You know, normally I'd like to powder coat it, maybe throw a little bit thicker paint on there, but when it's out of my pocket, and they bracketed what the total cost would be. The other thing is I had to fight for a little bit higher than average helper wage for my helper, because the guy is a reasonably decent carpenter and helped me out with a layout on this stuff so that we would get our spacing. If you look down this row, you can see how even the spacing is. The other thing is we had to build, level, and parallel a 20-foot layout table because the client wanted this thing to be really straight. And when you're dealing with solid material as opposed to hollow material, actually solid material is a little trickier to keep straight as you work with it. But, you know, a little sledgehammer work, that sort of a thing. 300-pound pull lock with a Stanley crowbar will get that stuff straightened out, you know, when it needs to be. I went with the top rail design. It goes on after it's built so that we can maintain a little more straightness. You can see here that this was welded onto some 1-inch wide stuff, and then we've got slightly wider stuff that goes on after that as a top rail. I kind of like that. And it opens up the possibility of drilling holes all the way through this stuff and then running screws up from the bottom into some nice wood, you know, so you could have a nice wood top rail on this and expect this fence to last a few hundred years because, again, it's solid material. I mean, people see that stuff from the 1600s, it's wrought iron and it's still there, okay? Expect that to last a few hundred years, but the wood would be replaced every 40 or 50 years maybe, or every 20 years, you know, depending on what type of wood. But you could put a nice 2x6 piece of cedar or something across the top of that, or even a hardwood, and have a nice little bar thing across the top of that. No problem at all. And total cost to the client on something like this, counting materials, is going to vary a lot because of the way these twisted pickets go. And if we don't use twisted pickets, it's a lot less money. If I were to use some of this material, which is actually hollow, we would have had a much lower material cost on this, but again, the hollow material isn't going to last as long. Now these posts are hollow, but they're pretty thick. We went with a thicker material than the original plan. For this length, because it's held onto a concrete wall, and I designed and built those plates with an adjustment in them so that if the wall is not totally straight, and it's not, it's been repaired, it's probably about 70-80 years old, and it's been repaired and added to a few times, we need to have some adjustment on that. So I built in about 4 inches of adjustment play on that wall, which hopefully is enough. And if it's not, I got a problem, but I can deal with it. I have extra plates and I can put longer bolts on there. The bolts will be bearing the weight on that, but I have a plan for putting little additional outriggers on those once it's in place. One of the specifications was there's no connection here. This had to go this way because it goes over an area that they didn't want any drilling or anything on the edge of a pool. The other thing that got a little tricky was getting this corner figured out. You know, we have the upper here, the lower down there. I kind of wanted to not have sharp edges where there was a possibility of somebody bumping into it. I probably will end up trimming this or doing something a little bit different on that, but the 20-foot layout table is the only way I could guarantee this thing would be straight. So, you know, part of the cost of building something like this is getting a massive layout table built. And, you know, it either has to be built on site or in close proximity. Now, This situation was that the client had a garage and a driveway we could have done this in, but his power wasn't working for some reason. So I'm using my Eastwood MiG 175 in the yard of my rental place, and I've got to get all this stuff out of here before my landlord comes back at the end of the holiday weekend. I can't tell him I turned his yard, even though he's an absentee landlord. I mean, I live here with roommates, but I can't just turn the yard into a commercial location. And when I charge basically as a laborer plus materials, or as a skilled labor plus materials, and somebody's getting a shop out of that, they're getting a good deal. My problem is I usually don't get paid for, shop, and we did one section of fence for this guy where I was just building 5-foot sections, and then we carried them in to put them together. And then we got the story, well, you can't weld here, you can't weld over there, you got to weld over in this other place. Then the power cord didn't work. And then the only place we get 220 power was kind of like in just a goofy location. So, we came back, we're building this, we have to haul it over there. It will fit on the roof rack of my van, but it's going to be a bugger to load and unload. 4-man job. And that's the other thing is when you work on larger scale jobs and they say, well, we want you to do this job, great, I appreciate the work, but I need help. And it's not okay help when you get around to it, or else I'm on the clock for that whole time waiting for the other help to show up, or I got to bring my guys in and they get paid a certain amount of money, and I have to make sure they're going to get paid that much money. And we don't play that game of, well, you've been out of work for this long, you're more desperate, therefore it's less money. I don't want to play that with people. And so we've kind of not had the best relations with this client. And I've been ready to walk out on this, except that now I've got money sunk into the project. But hopefully we're going to get this thing installed, everything's going to be good, and we'll be all right. I'm also doing this video to document the look and the quality of what we're building. And could it be better? Of course it could. We could put more energy into it. You could hire a $50 an hour welder to do cleaner welds on the edge. But I can tell you that for me and for what I do, it's never going to fall apart. Okay, I'll throw extra metal in there and guarantee it's never going to fall apart. The other thing is, on the most visible parts like the top rail, what I do is I slap this on afterward and we weld up underneath. See, that's all. I wouldn't call it spot welding, but those are welded points on that, so that's welded pretty heavily up underneath. Anyway, I think I got a phone ringing.